aching, chills, and falling around. What's that all about? Okay. Chapter 4, page 121. Beverly's 8 months into her pregnancy. She's been reading about the child's brain gets wired during the first 3 years of life. A friend told her classical music helps babies wire their brains for math and science. Well, then we better buy some classical music. Is this true, she wonders? Where would you go to find out if this is true? What do you guys have available to you that I didn't have when I went here to college years ago?
Internet.
Yeah, you just go Google stuff or Bing it or whatever. You just go look this stuff up. It's just amazing, all the stuff that's out there that you can find. Is breastfeeding better than infant formula? Do you know? Or is it 6 of one and a half dozen of the other? Does it surprise you that the people who sell baby formula like to make it sound like that formula is just as good as breast milk? The biggest reason I thought it was neat that my wife was nursing our little girls was because, like, for example, okay, if I I must have a little bit of the flu or something, aching like that. So what happens is Nina's body produces antibodies to fight off the germs that I'm packing around the house. And when she nurses the baby is getting those antibodies into her bloodstream. Is that cool stuff? To know that God has equipped the mothers to give their children protection from some of the things that are going on. It's just like it's tailor-made for each child based on each mother's situation. Now they talk about, in the book, they talk about where there's occasions when nursing isn't really going to be very workable for somebody, but generally you can go on the internet and type in maternity leave around the world, and most countries let you take off a year from work to get your baby off to the good first year start. And many of them will pay you, your employer will pay you while you're doing it, or there'll be some kind of government benefit stipend to help you. America is the worst country, one of the worst countries, in terms of offering mothers of infants that kind of latitude with raising their children. Why would that be? You would think that as sophisticated as we are and as advanced as we are, I mean, I'm thinking, couldn't you say to an expectant mother, you know, it'd probably be best for you to be at home with the baby for the first year, so we'll figure out a way where you can do your work at home over the internet and still keep working, but still have time to take care of your baby. Why wouldn't we do that? Well, we have a history in this country of businesses saying, your personal life is your personal life and it's none of my concern. And to me, that's too bad. That's a sad situation. And you can find that information on the internet. This chapter, it says, will help her answer these questions and many more. Page 122, infants begin life completely helpless. Have you ever gone to someone's house to see a new baby and they said, do you want to hold the baby? Has that happened to anybody? And so you reached out and put your hands around the baby's body, and what did somebody say? Hold his head up. He doesn't have the strength to hold his head up. If you don't hold his head up, he could be in trouble. You understand how helpless these little children are? One time I was in a class at the university, where they were talking about children who were not being taken care of by their parents very well. And the lady teaching the class, she said, well, look at Dr. Bonine. He's kind of stressed about this whole thing. She said, so, and I was taking the class because I wanted to learn something about children with special needs and children who came from disadvantaged home situations. And she said, he's rather shocked by some of the things we're talking about. Those of us who work in social services for the state of Missouri and see this stuff all the time. And I said, yes, I am kind of shocked. And she said, well, you want to say something about it? And then I still remember on the time, I said, well, I grew up on a farm in Oklahoma, and the animals that we raised on our farm took better care of their young than some of these parents you're describing to me. Now, if that's really true, shouldn't somebody in social services be saying, it's time to take the children away from these parents and put them in a home where they will get the help they need to grow up? Or is the parent who brings a child into the world have some kind of right to treat them any way they please since it's their offspring? Reactions? I mean, I know it would be complicated, wouldn't it, having a system where you take someone away. But if there are occasions when that should be done, then why don't we do it? Why don't we in our society say, we're not going to stand for this. We're going to do something about it. We'll take these children and put them someplace where they'll get some quality child care by people who really care about them. By their second birthday, they are running, climbing, this is on page 122, talking, and becoming independent. By their second birthday. So here they are helpless. 2 years later, they're running, climbing, talking, and becoming independent. And what's the phrase that we use for 2-year-olds?
Terrible twos.
The terrible twos. You see, it's just like, here was this little helpless child, and now 2 years later, he's into everything. And I say, well, wait a minute. He's just exploring the world he lives in. He gets into all my stuff. I'm going, so if there's stuff you don't want him getting into that's dangerous, put it up someplace where he can't get to it. But it seems to me like shouldn't we let children just explore the world around them and learn some things? I mean, I'm not talking about being totally permissive with a 2-year-old, but I'm thinking if this is where they are in life, we shouldn't be telling them how terrible they are to be 2 years old. They're on their way to adulthood eventually, and this 2-year-old place in life is part of the process. 11% of babies are born preterm. This is on page 122. You know what that means? Out of every 100 babies, 11 of them are born premature. And the 11 that are born premature account for 67% of the infant deaths in the USA. Okay, now, this breaks down here. The infant mortality rate is 7 per 1,000. So that means there are 110. See, if there's 11 out of 100, there's 110 out of 1,000 that are premature. You follow that? It's on page 122 and 124. But out of that 110, 67% of those 7 mortality deaths, or about 5 of those 7 deaths, were preterm babies. So what would that tell you if you discovered you were pregnant? What would you want to be doing as a cautious person to take care of the little baby that's living inside you? Don't do things that would endanger the growth and development of this little baby. What does the author on page 129 say about breastfeeding? Here's what she says. He says, begin within the first hour, continue for at least 1 year. So if the books are saying this is the healthiest thing for the child, why would some mothers in America not want to nurse their children? Have any of you heard stories of people on the airplane? They get on the airplane with their little baby and they put a blanket over their shoulder and start nursing the baby. And a stewardess comes by and says something like, "That's disgusting, don't do that in public." Have you read stories about stuff like that? You know what someone should say to that stewardess who's sitting across the aisle from the lady who's doing what's best for her child? They should probably say, "You're disgusting," for being disgusted by someone who's doing the healthiest thing for their child. I mean, somewhere we're going to have to start speaking up in behalf of. I really think some mothers don't want to nurse their children because there's too many people giving you grief for doing it. And to me, that's just sad, especially when you know it's so healthy for the child. On page 136 to 146, it talks about vision. You ever see a little baby staring off into space, looking around and rolling their eyes? It's pretty obvious they can't see much of what's going on. 136, they can see colors. How deep is a drop off? That's nice for them to be able to figure that out. A visual cliff. They see patterns, but they don't have the best vision. What about hearing? Well, that little guy on page 138. They're doing something to check him out. What's it say about hearing? How well do they hear? In child-directed speech, adults move close to the infant, speaking slowly, clearly, and with exaggerated changes in intonation. The sing-song quality of the child-directed speech provides greater changes in loudness and frequency, inducing infants to be more attentive. Researchers have devoted extensive study to infants' reactions to the human voice. By 2 months, infants show a preference for speech with the rising and falling inflection typical of child-directed speech within 2 months. At 4 months, they prefer to listen to human voices over silence or white noise. By 5 months, they can recognize their own names being spoken amid other names, but only if their name is spoken more loudly than the other words. What about page 139? Smell and taste. Did any of you, when you were little, have someone give you something that tastes awful and then watch you eat it, make a face, and then laugh at you? Send that person an email and say, "Shame on you." I mean, would you like someone to do that to you as an adult? So why do people do that to little kids? "Oh, I'm just having some fun." Well, if it's so much fun to suck on a lemon, then you sit there and suck on a lemon, and we'll all watch you screw up your face and make terrible faces. Infants show taste preferences immediately after birth, even before their first feeding. When given a sweet solution, newborns smile and make sucking movements. They will suck longer to obtain a solution that is sweeter as opposed to one that is less sweet. With a sour taste, they purse their lips and wrinkle their noses. A bitter taste causes newborns to spit and make a face. I'm thinking maybe God has designed these little kids to do some things to keep from getting stuff that's bad for them. What about motor skills? Page 142. What's going on with motor skills? voluntary movements. Why do they call them gross motor development? That sounds gross. What are these little kids doing? Can you look at those pictures and tell me what those little kids are doing? One of them's walking, right? One of them's sitting up. One of them's trying to roll over. When you have a little kid on a dressing table and you forgot to get something out of the cabinet, do you leave the little kid laying on the dressing table and go to the cabinet and get this stuff? No, you're going to hear this thump. It's like, oh no, what happened? Well, what do you think happened? You move away and the little tyke's going to, well, I didn't know he could roll around like that. Well, live and learn. There's one picking his head up. There's one that's crawling. There's one that's standing in a chair. Here's one playing with a little globe. That's kind of cool. Here's a little guy eating something. Here's a little kid using crayons. And then an older girl using a pencil. Have you ever taught a little kid how to color? Any of you ever taught a little kid how to color? So you take a picture and you start coloring inside the lines, right? Because that's the way we do it. Then you give the little kid a color, a crayon, and what does he do? He just goes back and forth over the whole thing. And what do a lot of adults do? Oh no, don't do that. That's not right. And he's going, what? What did I do wrong? You know, think about it. If you give a little kid a crayon and he colors the whole page, can you take a pair of scissors and cut the picture out and throw the border away and have a perfectly colored picture for the little kid to put in his scrapbook? What are we thinking sometimes? It troubles me that little kids get in trouble for just being little kids. And sometimes we say to them, no, you have to be more grown up than that, when in fact they don't have the ability to grow up like that. Have you ever had a little baby get a hold of your little finger and hold on tight? Who's had that happen? That is cool, isn't it? The rest of you need to volunteer to work in the nursery and let some little kid grab a hold of your little finger and just hold on tight. It is so cool to have that kind of a bonding experience with a little kid. On page 143, it talks about walking. Okay, 25% of the children walk by 11 months. Another 25% walk at 13 months. Another 10% walk at 15 months. Now, which would you rather have? The child who walks at 11 months, 13 months, or 15 months? Have you ever seen young couples at church? One couple's little baby starts walking, and the rest of them go, we have to go home and teach our child how to walk. It's like, well, what is this? A contest here as to who can walk first? I'm thinking some kids are just more inclined to do it, and others aren't. And if you try to push the kid, can you see what happens? If the kid's a little apprehensive about walking, and you try to push him to walk and he falls down, what's his next thought? I'm thinking I'm going to crawl for a few more years. Walking is just too dangerous. It's just not a safe thing to do. And by the way, if you add up 25 and 25 and 10, what does that come up to be? That's 60%. What are the other 40% doing? Well, they're not walking till maybe 18 or 24 months. And just don't get worked up about it. It's not that big a deal. Page 146, talks about cultural differences. So when you look at that picture on page 146 of that little Hopi Indian child being carried about in a cradle board, any idea why the mother has him in a cradle board? Does it tell you why? Why do you think a Hopi Indian would wrap her child up in a cradle board? Where's she going in the morning? Her husband goes off to work. She goes out in the garden. What's she going to do with her little baby while she's out in the garden? Lay him over there and let him eat dirt? Put him in a cradle board and carry him around with you. Now, are any of you inclined to say, yeah, but how's that kid going to learn to crawl and walk if he's in a cradle board? Well, one is he's not in it 24 hours a day. But look what it says there right next to the picture. By 8 months of age, they gain more physical exercise and catch up with babies raised in other cultures. Studies have found similar trends in babies in Chile. Infants among the Hopi tribe in Arizona and the Tiwa tribe of New Mexico take their first steps at about 14 months of age, or 1 to 2 months later than most other infants in North America. But the point is that once they start walking, they catch up. It isn't like they're going to be disadvantaged for the rest of their life. So it's a lot of it's just a cultural thing. Toilet training on page 147. How did they get that little girl to agree to have her picture taken like that? Sign a release, little princess, so we can put your picture in a textbook. That's disgusting. Take the parent and put their picture in the textbook. This is what we're teaching our little child how to do. It says on page 147, most toddlers gain voluntary control and coordination over the muscles that control their bladder and bowel movements by the time they are 18 to 24 months old. So if it's going to happen between 18 months and 2 years, then just leave it be. Do any of you know anything about your grandparents or about your parents and how your grandparents raised them? My grandmother had a little dress that my dad wore when he was a little boy, and I said, Grandma, why were you putting Dad in a dress when he was little? She said all the little boys wore them. They're modest, and when they need to go to the bathroom, there's nothing in the way. Out in the country, they just go to the bathroom. Do some of you find yourself saying, that's disgusting? So what do? We go to Walmart and buy a toilet that sings and plays music and makes chimes when they do things, and it's like, wait a minute, people. I think we've gone overboard with this stuff. I'm thinking, just don't stress the little kid out. Give them some time to learn how to do what other people do. Give them some time to develop their potty training techniques. Okay. Approach toilet training in a way that is positive and fairly relaxed. This is not time to engage in a major power struggle with a testy 2-year-old, and children are not ready if they show fear of the potty or fear of bodily functions. When the child seems ready for training, it's time to introduce the child to his or her own special potty chair. Have you ever seen somebody put a little kid like this on a full-grown adult toilet? If you wonder how the little kid feels, then picture yourself in front of a toilet that's way bigger than you are and climb up there on it and sit on it and see how it feels. I mean, come on, people. These little kids need some help. They need somebody to be a little compassionate about this whole process and about what's going on. All right. Well, we've got one more chapter to do today. Chapter 5. Cognitive development in infants and toddlers. Now, this is from birth to 2 years, and we're talking about what's going on inside their little heads. And look at that picture on page 152. What's that little kid doing?
Sucking his fingers.
What?
Sucking his fingers.
Sure enough, he is. Or she is. What's in front of her? Or him, whichever it is. Is that a book? When our first daughter was born, she would see me reading books all the time. And I had this little bookshelf that sat in the living room that I kept some of my favorite books in to pull one off and read it when I was sitting around the evening. And she would go over to that little bookshelf and she would pull all the books off and then curl up on the shelf. Did any of you do that? Did you have parents who read a lot? What do you think she was telling me?
And to read too.
I want to read too. Maybe I want you to spend as much time with me as you do with your books. So I took some of my books that were very valuable to me, classic editions of some books, and I would let her act like she was reading. And while she's turning the pages, what did she do? She tore the page. Oh, no. Now, is the book destroyed because it has a torn page? No, I just taped the page and I can still read it. And when it first happened, I'm going, oh, no. And then after I got over and said, hey, let her play with the books. There's nothing wrong with that. They're your reference books. Let her have some fun playing with them. And then later when she was grown, and I would open those books up and see that page that was torn and taped, I had this wonderful sensation of remembering when she was little and how much fun it was when I was studying for her to come out there and pick one of the books off of the table and lay down on the floor and lay the book out and just turn the pages like she was reading, acting like she was reading. And I really think that there's a lot of people in ministry who think their books are more valuable than their children. And that's too bad. That's kind of sad. But I had 2 daughters. All of a sudden, these 2 daughters came along and gave us 2 grandsons, born 5 days apart. And these 2 grandsons weren't into books that much. They wanted to play with Poppy's tools. Now, I made the adjustment to let my daughters play with my books. I hadn't made the adjustment to let my grandsons play with my tools. Have any of you heard an old man talking about his toys, tools? And his tools become like his toys. And so the way I solved the problem is go buy him some cheap tools, and then they said, Poppy, these aren't as good as the ones that you have in your toolbox. Can we play with those? All right, guys, go ahead and play with them. But I knew they were going to lose them. But, hey, people are things. People are things. Page 154 says cognition or cognitive development refers to the mental processes such as perceiving, thinking, and remembering. Did you ever see a little kid who got into something that the adults didn't want him to get into, so they took what he was playing with and open the cabinet drawer and put it way up high. You ever see someone do that? What does a little 2-year-old do now that he's learned how to climb and run and get around? For some reason, he perceives that if he climbs up there in front of everybody, he'll get in trouble. But when they're not around, he can pull the drawers out and climb up the drawers and get up on the counter and open the door and find the thing that was forbidden. Why would he do that? Hey, let me ask you another one. My daughter is over at her grandmother's house, and all the little neighbor kids are out there playing, and one little girl slips and falls and skins her knee. So she gets up and she's hobbling around, and listen to this. Another girl says, "Hey, I know what, let's run a race." Now, if someone's just skinned their knee and they're hobbling, why would anybody suggest that we run a race? And Nina said, "Why, Tom?" I said, "Because those cute little girls are totally depraved." Aren't they? Have you ever worked in a nursery at church and watched depravity come oozing out of those little children who are dressed to the hilt and look so cute? And sometimes the cutest ones are the ones that get away with stuff because, oh, they're so cute. Yeah? Well, they're going to be a cute little criminal someday if you don't get a handle on it and civilize these kids. Do something about it. Get inside their heads and find out what they're thinking. And I said to my daughter, "Why do you think that girl wanted to run a race?" She goes, "I don't know, Dad." I said, "Could it be because that girl fell down and skinned her knee and she knew that that girl would lose the race and she just wanted her to lose?" She said, "Maybe because she doesn't like that girl very much." I said, "Why doesn't she like that girl?" She goes, "I don't know, Dad." And I like to engage kids. Have you ever had a little kid start asking you questions to where after about 10 or 12 questions, you are ready to, if they ask one more question, I've had it. May I suggest a solution to your dilemma? Instead of just sitting there trying to field all of their questions, turn it around and ask them some questions. What do you think about it? What would you like to do? How would you feel if someone did that to you? And often they'll say, "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." But it's like now you're asking the questions instead of them asking all the questions. And now you're kind of stimulating them to do some thinking about what's going on around them. Perceiving, thinking, remembering, solving problems. Did you ever play with those little things where different shapes had to go in different holes? And you stuck them in there, and then they would pull them apart and they would all fall out, and you'd grab them up and stick them in the holes again. Did all of you play with one of those? Why did our parents buy that stuff? What were they trying to do? Teach us our shapes? Well, it must not work, because I have a whole bunch of people in math who still don't know what all those shapes are called. No. It's just developing their mental abilities, their cognitive abilities. We're doing things to promote thinking. And I really think that it's important for us to say to these little kids, let's just think about it. Let's do some thinking about this stuff. My sister would come up to see us in Kansas City from Oklahoma, and she had 3 little kids in the back of her tiny little car. And when she got to our house, she goes, "I just need to get in a room where my children are not there because they're driving me nuts." So then I'd say, "Okay, kids, let's go shopping. Let's find some cereal you'd like to have for breakfast while you're here." And I would take them into a bedroom where we have a little dresser drawer that was full of coupons. and I'd pull the drawer out and let them look through it till they found something they wanted to buy. Then we would get in the car and go to the store, and they would walk up and down the aisles looking for the thing they had a coupon for. And it got to be after a while, when they come out, they say, Uncle Tom, where are your coupons? And then one time one of them said, Uncle Tom, we don't have coupons at our house. Can I take some of yours home? Well, sure. We got a whole drawer full of them. We're not going to use them all. Go ahead and take some home. Solving problems, communicating with language. One time we were at the store, and the oldest one had already picked out what she wanted, and the two youngest ones were just roaming around, looking at stuff and having a great time running up and down the store. And the oldest one said, Uncle Tom, I think if we don't leave right away, you're going to get in trouble for these two little children running all over the store. I said, you think? She goes, yes, I think. I said, okay, let's round them up and tell them to get their cereal, and let's get back to the house. Page 155. Even young infants have a tremendous ability to organize and use sensory information in meaningful ways. Newborn babies prefer moving things, what else? On page 155. What do little kids like? Stuff that moves, contours. Where'd it go? Human faces, sharp color contrast, symmetry, curves and patterns. Page 156 says, some researchers speculate that at birth, babies are already equipped with an innate schema for the structure of the human face. You mean to say God sends that little kid into the world with already has in his mind this schematic for focusing in on human faces and becoming familiar with them and knowing which ones he goes to and who he goes to for what? Have you ever been at the house of someone who had a little baby and the little baby got a little fussy and you reached out to take them, they go no, and they're heading for their mom or heading for their dad. They're looking for somebody who can give them something they want, and I'm saying, do you want something? Maybe I can help. No, you can't help. I have to have mom or dad do this for me. But I think it's cool that God sends little kids into the world already equipped to recognize the human face. Now, do you understand what that means? Okay, if all the male faces a little baby sees are shaved faces, then what's going to happen the first time he sees someone with a big old bushy beard? Have you seen that happen with some little kids? It just, excuse me, it just scared him. It scared him. I've had people at church say, you want to hold my little baby, Dr. Bonite? And I'm going, no. Give them a little time to get a little older before they acclimate to someone like me. And it's like, what is it about me they didn't like? My raspy voice and my glasses. That just didn't fit in their schematic. Which means it's probably good to give some children a lot of experience with all that kind of stuff. And to me, the best thing we do for little kids as Christians is take them to church and put them in the nursery. I don't know if you realize the benefit. We had a neighbor who had a son the same age as our daughter, and when he went off to school, he was so traumatized, because that was the first time he'd been away from home. He was so traumatized, they took him to the doctor and he had an ulcer. In first grade. And I'm thinking, what? And his mother came over and said, how come Karen's not traumatized by this stuff? And I said, well, what do you see us do every Sunday? We get in our car and go to church. We drop her off in the nursery. She plays with other kids. She has a lot of other adults that interact with her. So we've already done some things to prepare her to go to school someday, and you just haven't done that. I don't think we Christians realize all the benefits we have for our children by just raising them in a Christian environment and doing all this cool stuff for them. Page 163. As children interact with the environment, individual schemas become modified, combined, and reorganized to form more complex structures. Okay, let's talk about that. If there's a cat in the house, the little kid will eventually learn to say what when they see that animal? Cat. Then what will they say the first time they see a dog? They'll say cat. And then you have to say, no, that's a dog. Cats are different than dogs. And they go, what? And sometimes you just have to let it go and say, hey, it's not worth stressing them out about it. I mean, so what if a little kid calls all the critters in the community cats when half of them are dogs? I mean, have we really done this child a disservice by letting him have that kind of reference point for all the little animals around? And in fact, if you don't make such a big deal about it and stress him out, you'll be surprised that later on he'll start sorting out the differences himself. I mean, have you ever heard a cat bark? Do cats bark? I don't think so. So if he sees one of these little critters barking and it doesn't fit his schema, then that's when you say, yeah, because that's a dog, not a cat. Cats meow and dogs bark. Help them develop the structures in their mind, but don't push it so hard that you frustrate the little kids. People interpret new experiences in light of their already existing cognitive structures. So, here's a little kid. We're talking about 2-year-olds here. Birth to 2. Here's a little 2-year-old that spent all of their time in the house walking on carpeting or crawling on carpeting. What happens when you take them outside in the yard and sit them down in the grass? Have you ever seen a little kid's face when you put him down where his feet touches the grass? Maybe you should take your shoe off someday and touch your bare foot on the top of the grass and see how it feels. No wonder little kids don't like that. And then I see some parent going, it's okay, it won't hurt you. It's okay. No, it's not okay. This little kid is being traumatized by this grass and he keeps pulling his foot up and you keep pushing him down to stick his foot some more. And I'm thinking, think a little bit about what you're doing and give this kid some time to adjust to it. And frankly, after a while, when he sees some other little 2-year-olds out in the grass, he'll probably go out there and crawl around. But he might want to have something on his hands and his feet and some long clothes, and just so he keeps from getting stuck by the grass. It's the same thing with snow and stuff like that. Extensive interaction with the environment is essential for each person's cognitive development. Extensive interaction with the environment. That means I have to give this child all kinds of opportunities to interact with their environment. So somebody comes to our house and they said, Nina, did you know your girls are in the kitchen pulling the pots and pans out of the drawers and out of the cupboards? She goes, yeah, it's okay for them to do that. And this friend said, yeah, but then you'll have to wash them before you use them. Is that a tragedy? To wash something before you use it because your children have been playing with it? I'm thinking that's okay. If the little kid starts to eat soap, I probably would stop him from doing that. But they need to have extensive interaction with their environment. Page 164 talks about adaptation, where you change your cognitive structure to better understand the environment. A 2-year-old is changing his cognitive structure? Yes, he is. he changes the structure from a cat to now he has a cat and a dog. And probably eventually he'll put both of those together and call them pets. And then he's at the store and he sees all those fish swimming around. And he goes, "What are those, Mom?" And hopefully she doesn't say those are pet fish. Because if you call those pet fish, what's this little 2-year-old going to say? "I want one of those." And I did not want my girls having pet fish. They smell up the room. They die on you. They're disgusting. Why do people even buy those things? But you're basically helping them change their cognitive structure to better understand the world they live in. We would go to church, in this church we attended, when our kids were 2 years old, and they would sit with us in church. And did any of you ever sit in church and hear some little kid with hard leather shoes banging them on the church pew? What's the solution to that? Have them wear tennis shoes to church, not hard leather dress shoes that make a banging noise when they hit the pew. Because, guess what? This little kid just found out a way to make noise. And he doesn't know he's in church where he's supposed to be quiet. He's just investigating his environment and having some fun with it. And then people get all worked up and bent out of shape. Sad. Assimilation is bringing new information into their existing schema. Let's see. Do you have a favorite breakfast cereal? When you were 2 years old, do you remember eating some kind of cereal for breakfast? Did your parents ever put some kind of cereal in little plastic bags and let you carry them around and munch on them? What?
Cheerios.
What?
Cheerios.
Cheerios? Did all of you have Cheerios? Well, there you go. Do you still like Cheerios to this day? You know. Do the rest of you still like Cheerios? See, I was given those when I was a little kid. And I'll be sitting at home and Nina will say, "So I'm getting ready to go to bed. Do you want anything before I leave?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to have some dessert. But I don't need to eat dessert late at night." So I say, "How about some Cheerios with bananas in it?" Oh, yeah. And if she says, "We don't have any bananas," on my way home from school today, guess what I'm going to do? Stop and buy some bananas. Because if you've had Cheerios with bananas in them, I don't think I had Cheerios with bananas when I was younger. But basically, you bring new information into existing schema. But we had something called pablum. Did any of you have that? Some kind of oatmeal stuff or something? For some reason, I don't recall oatmeal being that much fun to eat. I like Cheerios, but I didn't like oatmeal. So what happens is I carry this Cheerios with me and I give up the oatmeal. And every time somebody says, "You should start eating oatmeal to be healthy for you," and I'm going, I had oatmeal when I was a little kid. I don't want any more of it. So you do adaptation, where you're adapting your thinking, assimilation, where you're bringing new information into your existing schema, and then on page 165, accommodation, where you're modifying your old scheme or creating new schemes. To better fit new information. So, what is a 2-year-old? What kind of accommodation are they doing? What do 2-year-olds have that they like to play in? Those spring-loaded jumping chairs? Anyone know what happens when they get a little too hyper and they swing a little too high? It tips over and they fall on their face. and then they cry. And it's like, well, you know, when you're riding this thing around, you need to be careful with it. Page 168 talks about equilibration, going from imbalance to balance. Something throws them off balance, and you try to help them regain their balance. They're eating Cheerios. The Cheerios are all gone. We don't have any Cheerios, but we bought some Raisin Bran while we were in the store. Any of you like Raisin Bran? No. One. Anybody else like Raisin Bran? No. So what do you think happens when I offer my little girl some Raisin Bran since we're out of Cheerios? No thanks. No thanks. And then I start talking about, well, how do you know if you haven't tried it? But if you just touch a Cheerio and then touch a Raisin Bran flake, what do you conclude? That Cheerios are cool and round with a hole in them, and Raisin Bran flakes are disgusting. But if you put milk in them and let them get a little soggy, then the level of tastiness is elevated. I don't think so. For some reason, our little kids, my wife was a school teacher before she quit teaching to have children, and she said, at school, when I took the little kids to lunch, it always bothered me that kids would say, I don't like that, when this cook at school would make all this delicious food. So she said, we're going to make sure our children learn how to eat everything. And we would go to the grocery store and buy some of every kind of baby food. And I don't care how many times we bought it and how many times we tried to feed it to them. For some reason, our girls never did take to beets. Anybody here like beets? Thank you. It must be a math thing, that math people like beets. And I used to put these beets on their plate, and I'd say, look girls, your mom fixed these beets for supper, and you're going to eat some of them. I'll put 2 of them on your plate. No, I'll put 4 of them on your plate, and if you eat one, then I'll eat one. And if you eat another one, then I'll eat another. And then after a while, I'm going, you know what's kind of nice about you guys not liking beets? And they go, what, Dad? I said, there's more of them for me to eat, because I really do like beets. And I do. I wasn't lying to them. But do you understand that I keep talking to them that way? And after a while, they start to adjust their thinking. You'd be amazed at how you can use this stuff on yourself and on little kids you're working with. If you're in the nursery and some little kid grabs all the toys and puts them in a basket and heads to the corner and sits in the basket with all the toys and tells everybody who comes over there, no, you can't have any. You say, I need to help this child learn something about sharing. So you deliberately go over there and you say, I'm going to help this child make some perceptual changes in the way he perceives the world around him. And what I'm probably going to start with is I'm going to say, first, let's pick one of these toys that you're probably not going to play with today, no matter how long you keep them here. And he picks one. I said, there. Now let's give that one to somebody. So just hold it up and say, who would like to have this one? And somebody comes over and takes it whether they want it or not, because he's giving away toys. So they take one. And you see, it's almost like you deliberately spend time working with the kids to develop their mental framework and their mental skills and their way of thinking about things. Reflective abstraction. Relate new information to current cognitive structures. Children are naturally curious. Did you get that? On page 168, children are naturally curious. Who made children curious? Is that the result of the fall in the garden, or is that the result of God's creative handiwork? I think it's God's creative handiwork, that He made these little kids curious. So let's not try to stifle something that God put in them. Let's try to nurture that curiosity and help them channel it in healthy ways. Help them explore their environment. Page 172 says language represents thoughts, objects, and events with symbols. So what kind of thoughts do 2-year-olds? Have you ever heard a little 2-year-old say, I feel sad? What kind of thoughts have you had little 2-year-olds share? That's mine. Somebody comes to the house to visit, he's got all these toys. My sister, this is so funny, she married a guy from Greece. And they both worked, so they had tons of toys for their children. And her husband's mother came over to visit one time, and she didn't speak English, so only the husband could talk to her. So she couldn't talk to our daughter about things. But when she got ready to leave to go back to Greece, she took a whole bunch of their kids' toys and stuck them in her suitcase and took them back to Greece. What would you do if your grandmother did that? Whoa, whoa. Any idea why this grandmother from Greece did that? Here are these grandchildren in America who have tons of toys, and I have grandchildren in Greece, in Crete, who don't have any toys. So wouldn't it make sense, in her mind, to take some of these toys from the kids who have more than they need and take it back to Crete to give to the grandkids who don't have anything? Wouldn't that make sense to you? Say, well, I would think you would at least ask. Well, why would you have to ask? That's a no-brainer. If you have more toys than you need, and you have cousins in Crete who don't have any toys, give them some of your toys. One time I was having a talk with one of my daughters about her dolls. Okay, I was helping her do some of this thinking stuff. And I said, so if we had 2 cars, and somebody else didn't have one, would it be a good idea to give somebody one of our cars? Yes, she said. If we have 2 dolls, and we have a friend who doesn't have a doll, wouldn't it make sense to give this friend one of your dolls? Now, isn't it the same thing? Except, no, it's coming out of my pocket instead of hers. And I was watching her screw her head up and think around about it, and she said, Dad, what bothers me is if I give Susie away, Sally won't have a friend anymore. And if I give Sally away, Susie won't have a friend anymore. And they would be lonely. You follow her thinking? She wasn't saying we couldn't give a doll to a friend, but she couldn't give one of her 2 dolls because they were like sisters and they needed each other. Well, then instead of giving away a car, why don't we take some money and go to the store and buy a doll that you can give to this friend who doesn't have one? And I'll put up the money to buy it. Now that made sense to her. You see how you kind of have to spend time getting inside a kid's head to find out what they're thinking? And language represents their thoughts. And often when you hear them say words, you say, I don't know what they're talking about. So then you have to ask questions and just keep delving into it till you find out what's going on in their heads. And language represents objects. I had a nephew who was at our house with his little girl, and she said, Uncle Tom, do you have any apples? And I said, sure, let's go in the kitchen and I'll cut one in little pieces for you. And we go in the kitchen, and I pull an apple out of this little basket, and I pull a knife out of the drawer, and I look at her, and she's going like this. And I go, what are you doing, girl? And she goes, my mom and dad say knives are dangerous, and I shouldn't look when somebody's using one. Well, that's a good idea, isn't it? So you're not tempted to reach in there and get a knife and cut yourself with it? So sometimes you just have to ask them what they're doing, what objects they're talking about. My grandson, does anyone know what a bobcat is? A tiny little thing that you get on and a little bucket in the front to lift stuff up. Okay, his other grandfather has one of those. And when he was about this age, he said, Grandpa Jerry has a bobcat. He spelled it B-O-B-C-A-P. And I said, no, I think it's a bobcat. He said, no, it isn't, Poppy, it's a bobcat. And so then I thought, why does it matter? He's young enough where he'll eventually figure it out. And so I said, okay, it's a bobcat. So every time I talked to him about it, I called it a bobcat. Guess what happened within about a year's time? He said, Poppy, it's not a bobcat, it's a bobcat. I'm going, oh, thank you for helping me get that straight. Now, you see, sometimes we adults go, well, I told you that, and you argued with me about it. Sometimes I think, who's the smallest person in the room? Some adult who's acting like a little child. When it's like, wait a minute, I'm trying to help these kids develop their language ability. I'm trying to help them learn names for objects. I'm trying to help them learn names for events with symbols. Humans have an unlimited capacity to create new utterances. So what are some new utterances that have recently been created in your world? What is that thing with the green tag on it called? Hanging out of the computer. See it there? You don't see it stuck in the computer?
USB.
What is that called?
Like a USB.
Oh, maybe I don't know what they're called.
Or thumb drive. Sorry.
I thought it was a flash drive.
Yeah, flash drive.
Is it a flash drive?
Yeah.
Now, do you know why I call it a flash drive? Just to mess with you. No, I call it a flash drive because when I get ready to buy a new one for next semester to put all my classes for the semester on it, I buy one with 128 gigabytes, and that'll hold the whole semester's classes. But when I go online to order them, what are they called? 128 gigabyte USB flash drive. And it's like, oh. So what are some other words that are new today that 2-year-olds are going to have to learn something about? And if I had a 2-year-old in here and he saw that little green tag on there, what would he be tempted to do?
Hold it.
Go grab that little green tag and pull on that thing and probably break it. Well, shame on him. Or is it shame on me for leaving that thing sticking in there with a 2-year-old running around the room? Thoughts, objects, events, symbols. What are some of your symbols? Oh, I don't have it here with me. It's out in the car. I teach math over in the Langmaid room with a tablet. A tablet. You know what a tablet is in my head? A thing made out of paper that we used when I was a little kid to write things in. And now, what is a tablet? It's a miniature computer, isn't it? And how do I write on that screen when I'm doing the math to show people how to work these problems? Wouldn't it be called a pencil? What do you call that thing you write on the tablet with?
A pen.
What?
A pen.
I'm sorry?
A pen.
A pen?
Like a computer.
Well, I paid a lot of money for just an old pen.
A stylus?
It cost me $100, so I better have a fancy name for it. I can't believe it. I went over to Best Buy and bought the tablet because I needed it to teach that class with so many people in there. And I said to the guy, so is this all it's going to cost me? And then he says, well, if you want to write on it, you have to buy a stylus. And I said, and what does that cost? And he said, $100. See, that's like selling a guy a car at the car lot, and then say, if you want to drive it off the lot, you have to buy the key, and that's going to cost you another $500. This stuff is just dumb. When I bought my first computer, it wouldn't do anything. It was just a machine with 2 little slots in the side. And it wouldn't do anything unless I purchased an operating system. A what? And you know how Bill Gates became the richest man in the world? He was charging $100 for his little operating system, MS-DOS. Does it cost $100 to put that operating system on this tiny little disk? No, the disk only cost about 15 cents. So why is he charging $100? So he can pay his development staff to come up with all these cool things that you can do with MS-DOS operating system. You follow me? And become the richest man in the world in the process too. Yeah. Language represents thoughts, objects, events. What's coming up this weekend here in Kansas City?
The Chiefs game?
A Chiefs game. And what's that game called? It's not the Super Bowl yet, is it?
The AFC Championship?
What is an AFC championship? It sounds like a movie theater, doesn't it? Does anyone know what AFC stands for? You people, do you just walk through life saying, I have no idea what's going on around me? I mean, I get home, after we have these conversations, I get home and I get on the internet and start Googling stuff. Because I want to find out about this stuff. I want to know what's going on out there. Language represents thoughts, objects, events. It's the, what's AFC stand for? American Football Conference?
I think so.
And the other one is the National Football Conference?
Sure.
And if they win on Sunday, they win the Lamar Hunt Trophy for being the AFC champions. Anyone know who Lamar Hunt is? He's the guy who owned the Chiefs. He started out with them in Texas, then he moved them up here to Kansas City, and the National Football League wouldn't have anything to do with him. So he started the American Football League. And a whole bunch of new teams got started, and he formed his own conference. Here's the National Conference, the old line people from up north and back east. Here's the American Conference, the new thing that Lamar Hunt got started with some friends of his. And then one day, somebody said, let's have a Super Bowl where the winner of the AFC and the NFC takes each other on to see which team is the better team in the world. It's like, how can you say the world? I mean, we didn't invite any teams from overseas, did we? It's not even in the Americas. Central America and South America aren't even included. I don't understand how we throw words around. So we create new utterances. So people can communicate about the past, the present, and the future. And by the way, this is important. Can little 2-year-olds communicate about the past, the present, and the future? Can you talk to a 2-year-old and say, I'm going to Walmart. Do you want to go with me? And he says, what are you going to do there? And I say, I don't know. Buy some stuff. Do you have something you'd like to buy at Walmart? Now my daughters always said what? Yes. You know what these grandsons say? No, Poppy, I don't really need anything. Can you believe that? No wonder I like these little boys so much. Or they'll say, but if you want to buy some of this and bring it home, I'd be glad to eat it when it gets here. And I'm thinking, yeah, I can do that. Humans have an unlimited capacity to create new utterances. A computer a monitor or a screen. What's that plastic thing called that we slide around on the top of that tray?
Mouse.
I'm sorry, but when you say mouse, I'm thinking of those ugly, smelly things that used to get in our house. We would catch them with a trap, and when they died, they smelled awful, and we would get them out of there as quick as we could. Why would someone call that a mouse? Oh, does it look like a mouse?
It looks like
If I brought a mouse in here and turned it loose, would you say the mouse on the floor running around looks like that mouse there? I don't think so. I don't think so. I did this with some little kids one time. I wanted them to learn how plants grow, so we took some seeds and planted them, and then put water in them and set them in the window for them to grow. And then they popped out of the ground. And the way the plant grows is the seed pops open, and then until it has enough leaves on it to nourish itself, it lives off the seed. Do all of you know that from science class when you're in grade school? But little kids don't know that stuff. And I'm going, what's going on here? Where is this coming from? And they go, I don't know, Poppy. I'm going, well, let's find out. And so I reach over and get it and just pull it out and shake the dirt off of it. And they go, oh, Poppy. I go, what? They said, I think you just killed it. No, let's just dig a hole, put it back in there and pack some dirt around it, pour some water on it and see what happens. Any idea what happened? I killed it. Little beans have no resilience. I should have planted a weed, right? If I'd have put a weed seed in there, it wouldn't have mattered how many times you pulled it up. It would have just kept going. But sure enough, it died, and all the little kids got, oh, you killed the little plant. Okay, I had to give up hunting because of my girls reading Bambi. And now nobody wants to eat vegetables because of Veggie Tales. What is going on? Well, it's just fun stuff. People communicate about the past, the present, and the future. And that's one of the things that I think when I have a question on the test that talks about what's unique about human communication. I mean, it's obvious that animals communicate with each other, and we'll get to a chapter that talks about that. But did you ever hear a dolphin say to another one, so what were you doing yesterday? About noon. So do you have any plans for next week? I mean, they don't do that. God has given us this amazing capacity for language to talk about the past, the present, and the future. And if you like what's going on around you, you can what? Write a book about it or write a story about it. Did you ever see some dolphin say, wait a minute, I need to go get a keyboard. I need to get a laptop and start typing up a story for this to keep track of what's happened out here in the water? No. No matter how smart the animal is, they don't even start to compare with the intelligence, the language abilities that God has given to us. Page 173. Language is learned by imitation and modeling. Oh, I forgot to add this one from page 172. We use language to communicate about the past, the present, and the future, and even the impossible and the non-existent. Have any of you looked at those pictures of that ice ball that's 4 billion miles outside of our solar system? That the Space Exploration Center took a picture of it, and it looks like a bowling pin. 4 billion miles. We've got a camera out there that's taking pictures and sending them back to Earth. Is that cool stuff? Have you ever thought it would be fun in weather like this, if you're on your way to chapel, to just step outside and just close your eyes and mentally transport yourself over to chapel? And then when you open them, you're standing inside chapel. and going, that was cool. One time I thought, when we used to have chapel over that building over there, I thought, I got to figure out how I could move outside and just elevate myself and just kind of fly over there and land on the stoop and then walk in, and people would go, did you see Dr. Bonai? How did he do that? So I go, oh, it's just mind over matter. Mind over matter. Is that going to happen? Do you see why I make my family nervous? My wife says, Tom, living with you is an adventure. Well, that's a nice way to put it. Language is learned by imitation and modeling. They imitate, which means little kids learn a lot of bad words from adults who shouldn't be using bad words. Language depends on cognitive development, and language depends on social interaction. So if I want this child to develop his linguistic abilities, I'm going to have to spend time with him. That means I'm just going to have to talk to him about stuff. We're just going to have to interact and discuss what's going on. What are you thinking? What would you like to do? Where would you like to go? What would be a fun thing to do? And just spend time while you're doing things with them, talking about stuff and helping them develop their mental abilities. All right, that looks like that takes care of chapter 4 and 5. Will you be here on Monday?
No.
Nope.
And I guess I won't be here either. I'll see you on Wednesday. Let me turn this thing off. Somebody online said the other day, you took 4 minutes to turn that video off.